Hi, Greg Jarrett. You're in the strategy room. Republican presidential candidates reacting to today's Iran nuclear deal. Most of the GOP came out to denounce the agreement with Tehran. Senator Lindsey Graham says this deal is, quote, far worse than I ever dreamed it could be. And former Governor Mike Huckabee saying shame on the Obama administration. Here now with reaction, political strategist David Mercer and Brad Blakeman. Gentlemen, good to see you both.
Thanks.
David, the original goal was to dismantle Iran's nuclear program. This doesn't appear to do this. This sort of manages Iran's nuclear proliferation. Is this the great deal the president seems to be describing that it is?
Well, I think that may have been on the minds of some several years ago, but I don't think, given where we are in the success of sitting all the parties down, the P5 plus Iran, to get this done and to put a lid on what had been their efforts to acquire military capacity, I think to move the goalposts from back several years ago to are we going to eliminate their nuclear program altogether, I think we need to put a halt, and what this agreement seeks to do is put a halt to the military application of the nuclear capacity.
You know, Brad, Iran gets to keep a third of its centrifuges. It gets to keep its nuclear infrastructure, and they'll have breakout capacity within a year should they move in that direction, which has prompted the Prime Minister of Israel to say this is a stunning and historic mistake. Where do you lie on this?
Well, this is a huge mistake, not only for America, but for Israel and our allies. We're buying a false peace. Obama's buying a peace to skate through his remaining term as president. It's going to be somebody else's problem, another president. And Obama is true to his word when he told us Iran won't have a nuclear weapon under his watch. He didn't say under anybody else's watch, which is coming sooner rather than later. This agreement isn't worth the paper it's written on. They are in violation of international law, yet they get to keep what they're in violation of. And there's no reasonable method of trust and verify. We have to go to an arbitration panel to even get inspections. So the president was not forthcoming and truthful when he said 24/7 inspections. That is not the case, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
What struck a lot of people is the president out there today saying, we're going to have 24/7 access. That is simply not true. We don't have access anytime, anywhere, the IAEA. Instead, they have to go to a committee. Guess what? It's an Iranian committee. And then and that's a 2-week gap. And then there's 7 more days for the committee to respond. That's a lot of time to hide some evidence and divert. How is that verification 24/7?
Well, it would be a lot of time to hide some evidence or to hide their capacity if we did not have these monitoring procedures in place to begin with. So it may not be ideal, and on a day's notice you get to inspect, but at the same time, the alternative to this agreement would be that we have no clue, no idea. And I'm reminded of an old adage that, you want to keep your enemies, your friends close, but your enemies closer. And in this case, we are getting closer to having everybody on the same page as relates to this military acquisition regarding nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a step in the right direction. And going to what Brad had mentioned earlier, the details haven't been fully disclosed. So I think to jump ahead to say that this is the worst deal that has ever been written is a little premature, for one. And secondly, a lot of those that we hear the likes of Brad saying have no other alternative, and the last alternative we saw was going in and going in a warlike footing, which we've seen the results of that in Iraq, and it's already unsettled now in Iran. Let's curb their development and stabilize things in the Middle East so we can focus on Syria and other elements of the problems in the Middle East.
Well, you got to be immediately skeptical when a murderous tyrant like Bashar al-Assad likes the deal, not to mention Vladimir Putin. But look, Brad, what bothers some people is that once implementation is confirmed, and that's just a few months from now, Iran suddenly gains access to more than $100 billion in assets. They gain access to the international financial system. They get to resume oil sales, which are lucrative. Suddenly, this terrorist state is going to be rich. And Benjamin Netanyahu, I'm sure you heard his comments this morning,
Sure.
said that will only increase their terrorist acts.
No question about it. When they don't have the obligation of sanctions, they're banking their money so that in the future, in the near future, sanctions will be meaningless because they're going to fill their coffers up to make it unnecessary for sanctions in the future when they violate this agreement. Let's remember they're still holding 4 Americans hostage. They're parading in the streets as of Friday, death to America, death to Israel. And this is the type of fair bargaining. This is the good faith that these negotiators have found in this agreement. No, they're laughing all the way to the bank, and they're also building the instrumentalities to make good on their threats. This is a real bad deal for America.
Well, I mean, there is, the Obama administration says, well, there's a snapback provision if they violate. Once you've released $100 billion, how do you snap that back?
Well, I think their desire to have access to capital markets, to the world markets, was what got us to them being at the table in the first place, so that they can find some sense of normalcy and engaged in the world community, as opposed to isolated, which leaves them then no alternative but to go for terrorist acts or supporting efforts in.
You don't think they're laughing in Tehran, say, wow, we really snookered those stupid Americans?
Well, you know, for us to think that of our president or those who have committed their public service lives to seeing the stabilization of what was a looming problem, I think is a little underhanded and undermining. Just as the letter that Cotton drafted with Republican senators' signatures trying to do dialogue and communicate, not doing a deal with the Ayatollah and his people, as opposed to communicating with the President of the United States.
History is littered with leaders that got snookered, Neville Chamberlain being among the most notorious.
Well, Obama has not been snookered, and it doesn't help when your Republican senators are undermining him.
Real quick, last comment, Brad.
Well, if the president were as forthcoming with Congress as he was to our enemies, you wouldn't be seeing letters like this. The fact is that the president has shut Congress out of the process and basically told them, like it or lump it, and telegraphed to the Congress, I will veto any vote that is against this agreement.
Well, what alternative is there, Brad? What alternative has a Republican senator offered?
No, here's the alternative.
Tell me what the alternative
with Congress.
is. And he has been working with Congress.
Right, well, we're going to wait and see what happens. 6-7 votes to override a veto in the Senate, 290 in the House. Gentlemen, good to see you both. David Mercer, Brad Blakeman. Check out foxnews.com for more on this developing story. I'm Greg Jarrett. Thanks for watching.